Welcome back to yet another exciting session of Conclave. One of the most important qualities of a leader is resilience. Today's leaders are getting barraged with roadblocks, letdowns, and failed attempts at success. Perhaps we think of resilience from a personal perspective. When we think of resilience, the image comes to a mind of a person who just completed an ultra marathon with two prosthetic legs. We do not think of a leader who went through a grueling year and came out a better leader. While personal resilience is important, it is a critical component of an effective leadership. The true grit of a leader is not how they perform during the good times, but rather how they display emotional strength, courage, and professionalism during the most trying times. It is impossible to demonstrate resilience unless you have gone through difficult times. It seems only fitting that we engage in a conversation with Ms. Deepali Naair, the embodiment of true resilient leadership, for this fireside chat. To help steer this discussion with Ms. Naair, touching upon the nuances of resilient leadership, we are joined by our own CMO, APAC and Middle East of Monster.com, Saurabh Srivastava. An industry veteran with over 20 years of experience across leadership roles, he has served at some of the finest startups to grace India, such as Ixigo, MobiQuick, Jabong, Hauser, where he was jointly responsible for building up the brands and businesses to scale they hold today. Having started out in the more traditional marketing, world-spanning organizations like Maruti, Suzuki, Goodyear, and WPP, Saurabh holds strong capabilities across portfolio and brand management, entrepreneurship, and innovation. Saurabh embodies the value of constant innovation and growth with a flair of building businesses and brands grounds up. Saurabh joined Monster.com as the Chief Marketing Officer in 2022, heading business strategy and brand management for the company. Equipped with degrees from some of the most prominent in universities in India, such as Indian School of Business, Hyderabad, and Mudra Institute of Communication, Hyderabad. Saurabh loves to have conversations centered at the cross sections of tech, marketing, and product.
Hi everyone, welcome to Triumph 2.0, India's largest diversity and inclusion career fair by Monster.com. Today I have with us a very famous personality from the marketing landscape. She's someone that I've known for many years. She's led very formidable brands across diverse categories and portfolios. I welcome Deepali Naair as our guest today on this topic that we're discussing, which is resilient leadership. Welcome, Deepali.
Thank you, Saurabh.
Deepali Naair is a name that does not require an introduction in the corporate world. She's known and loved today as the Chief Marketing Officer of India and South Asia for IBM, and she's a marketing and media stalwart. She's led marketing for brands such as Mahindra Holidays, Saffola, Marico, and in the financial services, she has led leadership positions with L&T Insurance and HSBC. If you just look at these names closely, you will see two things. One, these are some of the most successful and formidable companies and brands in the world. And two, you will notice a diverse set of industries and experience that she's, capable of. She's a recipient of several awards. Three things: risk-taking, courage, and a hunger for learning and diversity is what sets her apart from the other leaders in this, landscape, and make her immensely successful today. One more interesting thing about Deepali is she also hosts a podcast called Being CEO with Deepali Naair, where she chronicles the leadership and transformation journeys of acclaimed CEOs. I kind of went through some of them and I found them really interesting. I would urge some of you to go and check that out. Welcome, Deepali, again to this Fireside Chat, Resilient Leadership, which is a part of the interactive leadership sessions that we're having here at Triumph 2.0, India's largest diversity and inclusion career fair by Monster.com. I am super excited to have you here with us today.
Thank you for inviting me, Saurabh, and your team. And I'm feeling honored to be here, and it's a pleasure talking to you specifically.
Thank you so much. So let's kickstart. I think the topic that we are really discussing today is around resilient leadership, and one of the things that like clearly comes to my mind is a career change, right? Because that's very fascinating. You've held multiple leadership roles in financial services, hospitality, and now tech, which is very rare to come across. We would like you to share some exciting anecdotes around these transitions. These could be both personal or professional.
Saurabh, I think when you asked me this question and when you were doing the introduction where you were pointing out that, I've been through, various industries, the one thing that stuck in my mind is that thanks to this, I know so many different people in so many different organizations. And, it's fascinating to have that kind of network. And simultaneously, I also looked back and I realized that, back when I was a child, I changed, 3, 4 schools because my dad was in the military engineering services. Then I changed college. I've lived in different cities, 6 or 7 different cities. And it is very important for you to adjust, to make friends. And I think that's what probably helped me change companies and industries also. The other interesting thing that comes to my mind is that I didn't plan my career like that. Okay, I must admit it. I must tell people this, that don't plan your career like this, because I'm not sure if it is a recipe for success for everyone. But to me, I think it's been more a happy stance, serendipity, because just one thing led to the other. I've had fantastic bosses and managers who recommended me for my next job. I've had industries, people, for example, CEOs of, let's say, a research agency that I was working with, or an advertising agency that I was working with, who just went and recommended my name to the other clients that they had. So it's been a case of total happy stance. I have not written a resume, for a long time, therefore, including the IBM job, where I got introduced to IBM, by my predecessor, who was a friend, him too, Vasant,
Yeah.
and so that's the journey I've had. But having said that, I think to the audience, I would say, when you're starting out young and when you're in your middle years, even working, please actually have a vision for your career. I think it's important. I think it's important to have focus. It truly is about being resilient, because it's not like, I haven't had my share of setbacks. They may have been personal, but you do require a lot of energy, to move away from those setbacks and come back, and, just get on with it, as I call it.
Awesome, wonderful. So I think one of the takeaways for me really is to plan it. I mean, serendipity is good, and it should happen to a lot of people. But when you plan it, you're also in a way planning serendipity, right? So
Absolutely.
I think having a vision, planning it, and being good at work. I think what I also hear is because of your good work, you were recommended by your peers, by your bosses, by your managers, and that's what kind of shaped your career.
Absolutely.
So that's my takeaway from there. And also, I think your initial years, which gave you a lot of this adaptability and flexibility, right? Because you were moving places, you were
Yeah.
moving schools, so that kind of set you up
Yes,
for success.
I think it did.
Very nice. I think moving on, one of the things again, Dipali, is that women play multiple roles in the society, unlike men who are more kind of siloed into, working. We're not good cooks. We are not good, housekeepers and all of that. But women kind of balance it really well. But what also happens as a result of that is quite often, due to these personal responsibilities, some of the women choose to opt out of their careers, right? And this becomes really challenging. A career break can be very daunting. So
Yes.
with you, spending 25 odd years in the industry, I wanted to ask, what are some of the best ways to utilize such breaks which inadvertently happen in your career, and how do you make sure that you're utilizing them to make a very strong comeback whenever you decide to come back to the job?
Saurabh, I'm very glad you asked this, and I've not had one, but I've had two career breaks. One 18 years ago when my son was born, and the second one in 2016 when my mother was unwell. And I won't focus on why those breaks happened, because I think we all make our own choices. But the first break was more than a year. The second one was 10 months. I think it's extremely important here that one, when you're doing a career break, you need to plan for it. Planning for a career break is even more important. Even if the career break comes to you suddenly, it may happen overnight, but then planning what you're doing in that career break is extremely important. The second thing is, don't treat it like a holiday. You consider it to be a working sabbatical if you wish. If you consider it like a holiday, then coming back will be important, will be actually very tough, because then when you're coming back, it'll be important for you to go back to the organization or to the one that you're applying to for a new job and so on and so forth, to say, listen, I'm not left behind. Because there are fewer jobs in middle management and in senior positions, and there are more candidates, so I think that's important. Now, how do you plan it? Okay. You must have a plan which either says you're going for further studies, or you're doing further studies, or you do projects and assignments and consulting gigs, which are in your domain. Third is, you could get into teaching. And teach the subjects that you're good at, because that also gives you a lot of continuity. Fourth is work with a lot of industry organizations, so that you're still staying updated and you meet a lot of people who are from your domain and who know then that you're very active. So these are all the four things that I recommend. Apart from going from further studies, the other three I actually did, and this benefited me. I actually did consulting. I taught a whole lot. And, I worked for industry organizations, and I did a fourth thing. I also launched a small business, which is not in the marketing domain at all. It was in the career coaching space. So I used to do a lot of work, and I continue to get, recommendations even now. When I did my break 18 years ago, when I didn't know whether I'd be able to come back or not, I wasn't confident during the break that I would be able to come back or not. I launched consulting for writing students GMAT essays, preparing them for, their MBA interviews and so on and so forth, and did a very successful job of that, right? So these are the 4-5 things that I recommend that women can focus on, so that when they go back, they're able to start from a position of strength, to say that, look, I've updated myself. Again, giving an example, during my second break, I actually focused only on, digital and technology consulting. I actually said no to the typical marketing execution or marketing services kind of consulting work, because I said, I want to focus on this, and this is the area of the future, and this will build my career further,
Right.
So you can make choices like that. And one more point that I want to make is that when you are doing a break, and when you're doing this consulting work, don't think too much about the money that you're getting. I'm not saying do it for free. Don't do it for free, please. But do not think about, I should be paid so much, so and so gets, X rupees an hour, but, why am I getting less? Because you're just starting out, focus on the fact that, the work that you're doing, how will this build your resume, in the long term? So this is, sort of some of the advice that I give. And a lot of the women that I speak to, and I get invited to a lot of forums to speak on this, they will ask me, say, oh, but, we genuinely wanted a break. Well, you are getting a break, because then you're choosing to work 3 to 4 hours a day, maybe. That's a choice that you make, but you ensure that there is continuity. Because if you're totally
and one question which is connected to this and which is coming to my mind is, how early should you start this planning? When do you know it is the time to start planning this? Because it takes time for some of these things to mature, to convert, right?
Yeah. So very good question. Thank you, Saurabh. See, my first break, I knew I was pregnant. There was a possibility of, me being at home and me not being able to go back to work. That's a thought that crosses every woman's mind. So you technically have 5 to 6 months to start exploring, figuring out, making connections, and so on and so forth, right? So I started doing consulting work the moment, I was able to, right after the birth of my son. The second break came very suddenly to me. I didn't know that I was going to take a break. It was one of those momentary decisions, because, illnesses don't come, from a planning perspective. Like I mentioned, my mother was unwell. Now, this time it was a bit of a slow start. But this time I sat down and I planned, and I said, there are 2 things that can come to me immediately. One is the work that I had done in teaching in various B schools. So I called up all my academic contacts. Even while I was kind of just those few days when I was exiting, the organization, I called up all my academic friends and I said, look, I'm available to teach a full course if required. And that's exactly what happened. So the first 2 months was slow, but then after that, the word spread. I went and met friends such as you, the groups that I have, and I shared with people that, look, I will need to be at home, but I'm happy to do some projects. I continued participating in conferences and things like those. So then the projects start coming, but they started coming in the third and the fourth month of the break. Yes, you're right. They didn't come in the first 60 days.
Okay, good. I think there are two very, very important things that I take out from this is Dipali, that one cannot ignore the power of planning, because if you kind of see something coming your way, then you start planning for that well ahead and stay connected. Do not isolate yourself. Do not become inert, because the moment you try and do that and kind of start treating that as a break or a gap in your career, that's what it's going to be. And if you're sure that you don't want this to be a break, but a journey wherein you kind of come back stronger with more skills, you upskill yourself, you learn new skills, as you said, you taught, right?
Yes,
So some of those things that you kind of pick up actually can make your resume more stronger when you're coming back.
absolutely.
Excellent, excellent. So kind of adding on from there, in today's fast changing world, the best way to succeed is to try new things, and you've tried quite a few in your career, as we hear, right? Right from consulting to teaching to being in the corporate world, all of that, you've kind of led by example. By launching your own podcast, which I'm saying I find it really, really interesting, you've become one of the first Indian women to host a business and leadership podcast. Now,
That's right.
please tell us, this entire story behind this idea and your mantra of how you're balancing this with the work that you have and the passion project that this has become for you.
So, I can go on this for an hour, but I will give you the short version, Saurabh. The podcast is a result of years of reading. I'm very fond of reading. I read a lot, And for about 3 or 4 years ago, I realized that when I look at the whole leadership literature available in India, it either is focused on family run businesses, the great, generation of businessmen that we have, be it the Tatas, the Oberois, the Godrej, their leadership, stories are well covered. Or we have the American CEOs very well covered, and all leadership models are coming from there, And then the third genre that was, cropping up was the new Indian startup founders, They were again being very well covered and celebrated in the business domain. I found that, if you really look at India Inc., and you look at top 200 companies, they're run by professional CEOs, come to think of it. And I found that
Yeah.
I think they probably got the short shrift in the process, and people have not covered what they do, how they do. And many of them are not MNC companies. So, the whole American CEO and how he or she runs the company may not be the only model of leadership, that works. So I found this space to be very, intriguing, and found that there is a gap. Now, this is a lesson for all those people who, like to do content strategy. It is about researching and finding a content gap, actually. I was all set to actually write a column. I had the invitation and acceptance from a business magazine where I would do a fortnightly or a monthly, column for them. And in fact, my first CEO interview that I've done with Sanjay Bahel on my podcast, I can show you his WhatsApp message because I had written to him months ago saying, I'm writing a column and I want to come and interview you. He's my batchmate, so he's the first name that, I kind of thought of. And while this was going on in my mind and I hadn't started really the process, COVID happened. My podcast is hosted on Awaaz.com. The Awaaz.com founder is somebody I've known for over a decade. And I was talking to him and saying that, look, I wanted to do this, but now I won't be able to do this. And he said these very famous words to me. He said, why write when you can talk? And you do such a fabulous job, Deepali, of talking on stage, and I've heard you, and so on and so forth. So why don't you do a podcast? I think the idea was born from there. But Saurabh, there are very interesting stories attached to this, which is about, me and my vulnerabilities. And I think all leaders, and especially women leaders, go through this, okay? Despite being a very successful CMO and doing these transitions and being confident inside a boardroom, I still went through, really? Can I do this? Okay. So much so that, a very interesting episode happened at my home where I went and told my mother, who does not understand the world of podcast. I mean, she's 75, she's old school. And I said, Mama, does my voice sound fabulous to you? Okay. And she says, yeah, you sound absolutely fabulous. And she told me, whenever you talk to me on the phone, it's such a pleasure. And she said, even at school, you used to win all the contests and, debating and speeches and things like those. I said, but you've never told me that I sound fabulous, so I almost fought with her. And my mom was like, Atha, so what? So I said, no, you never told me all this before. She says, Acha, nahi bataya, to kya hua, so what, that I didn't tell you earlier. And I actually turned around and told her, I said, I wish you had told me, I would have become an RJ by now. Just to prove a point. But I think I'm sharing this with you today to just share that I think we go through our share of vulnerabilities, and in terms of balancing, the second part, and this is extremely important with the corporate career. I think the way I balanced it is this. I will look at the whole, content strategy part of it. Okay. And the Awas team was extremely helpful. One needs to do delegation. Okay. Second, time management. And I will speak about both. In terms of delegation, despite me being a marketing person, I actually let go of the decision making on marketing of this podcast. I spent initial time in figuring out what it will be, what is the direction, that initial time I spent on it. But the day-to-day running of the creatives, of the lines, of the copy, I actually do not interfere there at all. Awaaz team does it. What I actually focus on is that I'm the editor-in-chief. So I decide the guest that comes onto the show. I am the author of all the questions that we write. I do the research on the person who's coming to the show. So I'm truly editor-in-chief and the roles are very clear. It's their job in terms of where to put it up, how to market it, etc. And they've done a very good job. We've spent 0 rupee on marketing this podcast. And it's the second best-selling show on their platform after Economic Times. Okay.
Wow.
And we've got 4 awards, for the show. I've got one personal award of being a top 25 creator in Asia Pacific, female creators. But I feel very good about it, Saurabh. That one I like to mention because all the other women are either Gen Zs or millennials. Okay. So I feel very good about it. So this is truly my, second baby, as I call it. The other thing that we did on the time management thing is that, most people launch a podcast when they have 2-3 episodes in the bag. I actually launched it after I had 8 episodes in the bag because I said, look, I am a corporate professional. I may not get regular time, unlike the others. So how do we do this? So we created a bank, which was a smart thing to do. Because I've had, when I did a change in assignment in IBM, there was a period of 3 months when I couldn't record anything. So we've always had a bank, The second smart thing that we did was that we never announced whether my podcast was a weekly or a fortnightly or a monthly. We just didn't announce. It would come and, people kind of in their heads thought that it was like a, 3 to 4 weeks period, but we didn't announce. So that put less pressure on us. The third thing that we did was that I was very disciplined, where I told the Awaaz team that, look, IBM comes first. And therefore, I have a principle that I actually do not record 9 to 5 p.m. on weekdays ever, and the CEOs that I go to also appreciate this. I tell them, I said, look, like you, I'm a professional, and therefore I want to do this typically on the weekends. So most of my episodes have actually been recorded on a Saturday and a Sunday. And lots of the CEOs are friends, so they oblige, and it's fun. Eventually the recording that we do is fun. There's 0 pressure, like you and I are talking just now. So, it's a Sunday afternoon well spent. So that's how we manage the time. And I have actually timed it now. I don't spend more than 2 hours per episode in terms of prep and in terms of the actual recording. I now have so much trust in the team that I don't even listen to the edited version any longer. I listen only for the first 8 episodes. After that, I think they came back to me only with 2 episodes where they said that, look, we have this little doubt, can you hear and tell us, how can we cut or how can we edit? But apart from that, I don't even listen to the edited version any longer. That's your answer.
Wow. Wow, truly fascinating. And I must tell you, I've kind of heard a few. You do sound really, really good. And your mother was right when she said that. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's about, so you talked about vulnerability, which is very, very, apparent. It's there. How do you fight some of those fears? How do you kind of do that you want to do is very, very important. Again, I see a lot of planning that goes behind a lot of these things, right? So we end up hearing a 15-minute or a 30-minute episode, but I'm sure the kind of planning, the kind of efforts that go behind that are very, very large,
And
right?
Saurabh, it's a team
So,
effort.
yeah,
Apart
it's a
from
team
planning,
effort.
it's a team effort.
Right, right. So with this, I kind of wanted to move on to something which is more organizational.
Yeah,
So I think over the last, 5 to 7 years, you, me, everyone has kind of seen this, change that is happening across organizations. They're moving the needle for women and other, underrepresented groups, uh, and more so in the upper echelons of, the society and the corporates. But the gender stereotypes, some of those things still are a long way to go, in my view,
true.
right? So, what do you see as one of the biggest obstacle in achieving this integrated leadership?
Saurabh, I'm going to answer this question, not for IBM, but I think I'm going to answer this question as Deepali, who's experienced this at IBM and at the previous organizations that I've worked, because there's a point in comparison that I would make. I also want to say that IBM is, I think, one of the finest organizations when it comes to diversity and inclusion initiatives and how it is part of the culture and the fabric of the organization, and that's because of years of, practice and focus. And I can say that with confidence because the mandate comes to me as a leader, and I know the mandates that we have on diversity and inclusion and how we ensure that it happens. And I also experience that on a day-to-day basis. I've never felt more freer in a culture, and as I do at IBM. But let me also compare and give you an answer as to what needs to be done according to me. One, of course, is the societal context. And societal context is not in the hands of corporate organizations. Societal context is a context that needs to change with media, with in-school education, with in-college education, with what happens inside our families. Are we truly inclusive when we are bringing up our children? I think all those things matter, and that perhaps will take some time. And I don't think it will happen in the next decade. I think a few decades is required. The second thing, when it comes to managing senior women leadership or inclusion at the senior level, CXO level, C-suite level, I think there again the pipeline during COVID has actually become smaller. That's what I'm reading, in magazines and newspapers. And one of the things that is coming up is that a lot of the organizations have actually launched programs and launched policies. But the two elements which still need to go further, one I think is the male allyship. I think we need to have men as sponsors and very strong sponsors, because I've noticed that in a lot of organizations, and I get invited to speak at a lot of organizations, right? So I'm speaking as a woman to a women audience, but I think that men should also hear it, for example. Right. So I think that male allyship is very important. Second is that we must have more and more and more women who should be celebrated, who should be, popularized as to how they manage to have successful careers, because I think those examples matter a lot to younger ones. And if we can get those leaders to speak about their vulnerabilities, even better, because when we come across as, all powerful, accomplished everything, we sound like it came very easy to us. But it's not easy. And if you speak to any woman leader, she will tell you that, look, it happened and it was a tough one, and I think that's the conversation, that we need to do. Sometimes I get asked and saying, what is the mantra, for example? And I say, just stay the course. Date raho, because that requires a lot from a woman in any culture, not just in India, by the way. So if you read Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In, you will realize that across America and across India, the biases are the same. You go through similar issues. So I just always say, date raho, that itself is very important. But to answer your question, I strongly believe male allyship, and I think more and more stories about women leaders getting shared is going to, invite more women to not give up mid-career and continue.
I know, and that is really, I think the mantra, which is also, what we're talking today, which is resilient leadership, like Date be at it, don't give up, right?
Yeah.
And Men as Ally is something that is very interesting. Again, in fact, as a part of our reach out before Triumph, we realized, and we did a little bit of deep study amongst our database and all of that, and we realized that it is not so much about sympathy as it is about empathy with these communities, whether it's the women workforce or whether it's the LGBTQ. So we actually also did something very similar, Dipali. We came out with a large campaign moving on to Triumph, where we said that come out as allies. And that was the entire spiel around that, saying do not be sympathetic, be empathetic. Come out as ally, come out as friends, talk about these success stories, right? They need to be celebrated. And I think you're very right in kind of pointing that out.
Yeah.
Cool. Changing gears a bit, Deepali, now, and moving on to what everybody today talks about, which is digital. And digital is exciting. We all know that, and there's a lot of innovation every day. But what comes to your mind when you hear marketing and innovation in this ever-changing, landscape, digital landscape?
Two favorite passionate topics that I like to cover when we discuss marketing and digital. Okay, one is finally marketing has to prove ROI. Okay, and the sooner marketeers realize it, lots of them are still not in jobs and roles where they have to prove ROI. Okay, so the sooner marketeers realize it, the better it is for them, and marketing needs to do that for its own survival. Okay, otherwise it will become an unnecessary hygiene, or maybe not even their function, inside organizations. I think that's one. Number two, the org structure of the marketing team. Where do they report into? The kind of KPIs they have, the kind of responsibilities I have. Within the CMO organization, how do you structure the team in terms of, ROI and brand is separate, or is it product marketing and, ROI together? I think that is a very, very fascinating subject. And, I think that actually makes for sometimes a success or a failure of a marketing team inside a larger organization. So I think these two topics are very, very interesting. But apart from that, of course, I think one of the mantra that I have here is what gets measured gets done. So that ROI bit is even more important. And even if you have an organization within the CMO organization, please ensure that whatever people are doing is getting measured and they know, what they're delivering and how they're delivering. Because a lot of the time people still have very antiquated way of looking at, what they're doing. And the last one, what's very fascinating for me is that, rather than being the battle of, if you leave the ROI and the leads and the sales generation piece aside, in the good old days, how you used to measure the brand in terms of top of mind and, brand associations and brand recall. I think that whole arena has changed and people need to understand that. I think it's become the fight of the real estate on the phone. I don't think it's any longer the overall top of mind brand recall. I think we must change the matrix in the way we talk about brands in the conversation. So these are some top of the mind things in my mind that come on, marketing and digital marketing.
Absolutely, and it's very, very complex, but very, very exciting. I think you and I have seen this entire change, right, happening in front of our eyes, and it's very fascinating. And how do you adapt to this? So, with all of this complexity, Deepali, how does one navigate and adapt to these changes to still drive that customer centricity? How does one do that?
So, there's a little bit of a joke in my head in this, okay, and I'll just laugh, which is that don't use the word customer centricity for the sake of it. Be customer centric, So the answer to this is just be customer
Just be.
centric. I do think here that I think this is one question that I would put to the CEOs. And I've spent a lot of time with the CEOs now, right? I think the culture of the organization needs to be customer centric, not just the marketing team. Marketing team has to be, but I think the whole organization needs to be, customer centric. Are we designing our product experience, our post-sale, our pre-sale experience, which may not be in the marketing domain, for example? Is that customer-centric truly, or is it still siloed, or is it still coming to us because traditionally we've run the businesses like that? Are we truly customer centric enough that data flows freely inside our organization about the customer, and people are empowered, and encouraged to take decisions on the basis of, customer data that comes to us? So I am going to leave this question with more questions, Saurabh, but I think the biggest one is that, are you paying lip service to customer centricity, or do you truly believe in it?
Yeah, and I think for a lot of organization and brands, and I also keep saying this, it's about walking the talk, right? So everybody says it, but do you really practice it? And is it practiced across, the organization, which is very, very important, because it's not about marketing being customer centric. The organization has to be customer centric. Very valid point, Dipali. And some of these questions still remain questions, right? Uh, so you've been now, working for over 25 years, and during this time, you've seen this entire digital transformation and disruption, right? Companies have changed their business models. Very, very new business models have come into the market. We now see 11-minute deliveries and 15-minute deliveries and whatnot, right? And you've interacted with so many CEOs and CXOs across your podcast, in your professional career. You're now doing a podcast series as well. What is your personal take on, if a company was to reinvent itself, if a company has been a legacy company, right, has been there for 15, 20, 25 years, what is it that it needs to do in terms of products and brand to still be relevant? I mean, being relevant, I think, is the most important thing, right? So how does one do that? How does one reinvent themselves continuously?
My point of view, and also after conversations with 35 CEOs, I would say one is being customer centric, truly being customer centric. I mean, everybody in your organization, are they talking to the customer? Is the CEO talking to the customer or not? Second is culture. What's the culture inside your organization? Are you willing to listen to new things that are happening? Do you shut them down? Do you encourage them? Are you willing to listen to criticism from your own employees, to discover what's happening in the market? Are you open to the fact that, listen, you may be doing things wrong, in the market, and competition's eating away at you, and that competition may be very small? Because in this new world, the competition grows very quickly. So the culture of the organization, depending on the industry that you are, is extremely important. And there is that famous line, right? Culture eats strategy for breakfast, or something like
For
that.
breakfast, yeah.
Yeah. So I truly kind of believe, that culture of an organization is very important. The third thing is, I find that the CEOs today are very open to the fact of bringing in technological transformation, digital transformation into the organizations. And you mentioned a question to me about legacy organizations. They are the ones who need to transform. They're not born on the internet. So, some of the decision making structures and free flow of information that you see in the new companies is not, yet ubiquitous in legacy organizations. So I think where they may fail or may succeed is in terms of how they manage change. Are they looking at incremental change, Hindu rate of growth, as I call it? Are they looking at dramatic change? And are they preparing the organization for that kind of a change? Whether that change may impact processes, that change may impact gross margins, that change may impact size of people that you have, that change may impact the way you manufacture. But the organization needs to be prepared for a change and a transformation. And CHROs, I think, should truly partner their CEOs in this, because change is not easy. So I think that's a third pillar that I kind of see as an important one, that when companies, and therefore products and brands, need to seize the opportunities.
Sure. And in this entire path, of reinventing yourself, L&D somewhere becomes very, very important, right? So so how is it that you're growing with and within the organization? What are the essential criteria? So how can young professionals, in your view, can stay at par in this era of this entire learning, unlearning, relearning? And how do they kind of have that growth mindset? What are your, quick mantras on that?
So I wrote, I think, a LinkedIn long form post on this a few months back. it's on learning agility. And I want to explain, it's not about speed of learning. It's not about how quickly you learn, which, by the way, I've had to do because I've changed a lot of industries. But, learning agility has got two parts to it. Okay. Let me explain with a simple example. It's like how a ballet dancer moves from one pose to the other, right? But the grace with which he moves from one pose to the other, the in between time, the change, the transformation process also needs to be smooth. What do you require for that? What you require as an organization and as an individual, you need to have that mindset which says, I'm ready to deal with ambiguity. So it's not about the fact that I need to change my goalpost. I need to be ready that my goalpost might change while I'm on that path. So I'm on the highway, but my goalpost might change, and how I quickly turn around and start learning all afresh. I think this organizations need to have this agility, and as an individual, we need to have that agility too. I think gone are the days when, people who are starting today, for example, they can think of working for the same organization for 30 years. Organizations may not exist for that long, or that they will continue to do the same job in the same way. It ain't gonna happen. So judge yourself on the fact how comfortable you are with ambiguity. Do you welcome change or do you resist it? Are you scared of change, or are you launching yourself into it? The second is, are you really reflecting and adding to your own education, so to speak? At the end of the year, sit down and think, did I learn something new this year? Be it in terms of digital marketing, or even if you're in customer service, or for example, now I do digital selling, by the way, at IBM. What are the new things that are happening around you, and am I learning those, and am I therefore, refreshing my resume, every year with something new? I can't be doing the same thing for the last 10 years. I will be a fossil. I'll be a dinosaur, very, very quickly. So I think that to me is the process. I think I established an acronym for this, and that was an acronym called ROCKS. I have it written here near my desk also somewhere. Which is, R, I think, is for reflection. O is learn from others. C is classroom learning. K is knowledge from books and TED and videos and things like those. And S is sharing what I'm doing today and what I do at these schools. And I said, if you follow the principle of rocks, you will actually continue to learn.
Great. And I think one of the very valid point that you picked up was being future ready. I think that's what it is. Are you today equipping yourself for the skills that will be required in the years to come, in the future, in the months to come? And if you're doing that and doing that really well, it could be whichever way you want to do. You want to do courses, they are available. So I think right now, with this entire democratization of information, it is actually up to the individual that how are you equipping yourself to be ready for the future. True. I think when I look at the clock, I have not realized so much of time has gone by, Deepali. I just think we could go on and on, given that you have so much to kind of contribute to all of this. But sadly, we've kind of got boundaries of time. Yes. So once again, I think thanks, Deepali, for being here with us today and sharing some really insightful stories and views. Some of those are very anecdotal. They come from your career, your life, right? Very, very meaningful. I'm sure the entire audience over here got a lot of interesting understanding on how do they navigate their careers, they make the most of it. So again, thank you very much for being a part of Triumph 2.0, which is India's largest diversity and inclusion career fair by monster.com. We wish you the best.
Congratulations to you guys and all the best for the initiative that you have. I think it's fantastic. I will do one small plug to everybody. Please do listen to the podcast. I think it's even more meaningful. Being CEO with Deepali Naair. It's on Aawaz.com. And you can follow me on Twitter at @Deepali Naair. Just remember to spell the Naair with a double A. And you'll find me very easily on Google also. And I look forward to hearing your feedback. And if you have any more questions on sabbaticals, being future ready, learning, I'm happy to answer those questions on Twitter. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much, Deepali. Thank you. It was lovely having you over.
Wow, that's truly inspiring journey, Ms. Naair. Thank you, Saurabh and Deepali, for such an amazing discussion. Thanks for watching. I'm sure you have thoroughly enjoyed the session. Good evening, everyone. Have a good day.